And then ultimately, then, the last two chapters of Revelation is the restoration, which is the complete and total reversal of the curse. It's gone forever, and it's replaced by the new heavens and the new earth. So creation is remade. We, as part of creation, are remade, and we have new bodies, and we live on the new heavens and the new earth, and we live in a place that's better than Eden. This is Fixed on Jesus. Hey everybody, welcome to our Fixed on Jesus podcast of Center Church in Gilbert, Arizona. My name is Rich, and I am joined by Mark Johnson Jr.
Hello, Rich.
Hello, Mark. And Heather, behind the glass. How you doing, Heather?
I don't know how to answer this question. I'm doing well. That's all I'll give you.
That was
That's
like a phone voice.
Not going to say anymore. Not going to say anymore.
Wow, well, that makes it mysterious and
Yes.
weird a little
If you
bit.
have any
Always
questions
leave them
about
hanging.
Heather's status, just
If you
email
have
us.
questions about why Heather's holding out on us or what she doesn't want to, if you want to speculate on why she's not explaining how she's really doing, please email us at production@centergilbert.
That's right. So as far as what we're talking about today, besides Heather's status of happiness, we are going to talk about biblical theology. And it's something you might have heard in one of our previous episodes.
We did it on a Friday. What are those called?
What are they called? Go ahead, Heather.
Rapid Fire Friday.
Do you want me to play the theme music?
Play it.
All right. No, I'm not going to play it.
Rapid Fire Friday. Mark, what day is it?
Rapid Fire
Boom,
Friday.
boom, boom. You know what I got to say? Shout out to Yoel.
Yeah.
His favorite part is when Rich says, boom, boom, boom.
Do I say that? Okay.
Yep.
All right.
So we talked about it on Rapid
Biblical
Fire
theology.
Friday.
Yeah, that's right.
What does biblical theology mean? And then once you define that, we're going to walk through it. Like, you're going to hear the whole story of the Bible on this episode.
Yeah, we're going to give it a shot. Right.
Yep.
So, yeah, it might sound weird, like biblical as in biblical theology, but it actually describes a discipline on how to understand the Bible. So, for example, if you pick up a book that's called systematic theology breaks the Bible up into topics and asks the question, what does the whole Bible have to say about a given topic, which could be the scriptures, could be angels, demons, the church, God, Jesus, you break it all up into topics, right?
Yeah.
But the Bible was not organized in topics. The Bible's a book like any other book. And so biblical theology tracks the unfolding drama of redemption from Genesis 1 all the way to Revelation 22. And so what you have is in biblical theology is a study of how the Bible tells the story and how that unfolding drama is portrayed both in the Old and New Testament. So if you think about just at the most basic level, you can break the Bible storyline up into four parts: creation, fall, redemption, and restoration. So now most of the ink in the Bible is given to redemption.
Yeah.
So you have at creation. Do you want to just go through each one?
Sure, yeah. Well, creation is obviously in Genesis.
Yeah,
right?
Genesis 1 and 2, right?
So the story of
It's
creation.
the story of creation where we find in the beginning God creates all things, and there's a refrain.
Yes.
Each time he does something in the end of each day and the parts of the day, he says, and it was
Good.
good. That's right. So
Except for one.
except for one. Which one was that?
When he created male and female.
And what was
he said
that?
It was
Very good. And so and you might think, okay, well, who cares about that? Well, what we need to recognize is that the original intent here of the created order was good. Now, you look around the world that we have, and we can't say that without exception that it's good. There are aspects that are good, but it's fallen and it's dark, right? We have evil, we have wars, we have rumors of wars,
Yeah.
we have places that experience famine and disease.
Yeah.
That is not the original part of God's creation. God's creation was created good. And then the pinnacle of creation is mankind. Huh?
I thought you were going to say marriage. Go
No,
ahead.
mankind. The pinnacle of creation is mankind, and mankind is the pinnacle of creation because mankind is created in God's image. And so now the problem happened in Genesis chapter 3.
Before that, though,
Okay.
you're going to go to the next part, which is the fall.
Yeah.
What are some of the things that were different the way God created them before the fall?
Okay, so God institutes a couple things pre-fall
Yes.
that we need to recognize. One is that God institutes work. Work is a good thing. It's not a result of the fall.
Yeah.
God also institutes marriage before the fall. And so marriage is a good thing, and it's not a result of the fall. Now, both work and marriage have elements now that are difficult because of the fall, but they were both instituted before the fall, and the curse that mankind brought onto the world before that was pronounced by God.
Okay, and then what about death? Was there death before the fall?
There was no human death before the fall. Okay. No human death. Now, there's debate amongst Christians. Was there like microbial death? Was there plant death? Was there animal death? All those things, that's all debated.
Yeah.
One thing we can say for sure is that there was no human death. So people didn't get sick, and they didn't get old and die. They were meant to live forever.
Right.
And so mankind was created to live forever in paradise.
Yeah. So it only takes 2 chapters of the Bible for
and then it all bam.
talking about God's perfect created order in the garden, east of Eden.
Not yet.
Not yet?
In
Oh, okay. Eden. Okay. And then immediately in chapter 3 is the part
Satan
you already
shows
talked
up,
about.
right? Satan shows up in chapter 3, and we have him tempting our parents, Adam and Eve. So they're our first parents, right? He tempts, the dialogue is with Eve, where he tempts her to take fruit from the knowledge of the good and evil, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And Adam is standing there as well. And so they...
Passive.
Super passive. He needed to be leading. He needed to actually kick the snake out of the garden. He did not. He failed. And so then they eat the fruit. Their eyes are open. They realize they sinned, right? And God comes and...
They hide.
They hide, and God comes and finds them and pronounces a curse.
So was there shame in creation before this moment?
No, there was no guilt. There was no reason for guilt or shame.
But they feel shame and they hide. They recognize their own nakedness.
They do. They recognize, because they weren't thinking about themselves necessarily before that. They weren't self-focused.
Outward.
Yeah, right. And so now then it's like, oh man, here they're aware, and they've where they're fallen short, and so they where God's holy, they go and hide. And so then God tracks them down, and he pronounces a curse over Satan, the woman, and the man.
Let's tease each one of those out.
Sure. Satan, he has a curse. It's his Genesis chapter 3. And he pronounces a curse like he's going to, the snake is going to crawl on the ground.
So is the snake Satan?
Yes.
Okay.
He's going to crawl on the ground, and there's going to be
on its belly
trouble, right? Exactly. But one of the interesting things in verse 15, chapter 3, God says, "I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your offspring and her offspring." And then you get this promise in the second half of verse 15. Right there in the garden, he says, "He shall bruise your head, and you shall bruise his heel." We don't know who that he is, but there's a promise of someone who's going to come, and it says bruise, but we know this later to be Jesus. Jesus came and destroyed the works and power of Satan. But his heel was bruised. He died on the cross, right? And so there's this promise. It's like the first glimmer of hope in a dark and foreboding time, like where God is announcing gloom. He announces a reason to hope. Somebody's coming, and he's going to be the serpent crusher.
Okay, so that's the curse on Satan.
A curse on Satan. Then woman, her pain and there'll be pain in childbearing. And then there's going to be a he says your desire will be contrary to your husband, but he shall rule over you. And so there's animosity introduced between what's designed to be harmonious between a husband and a wife. Now there's animosity.
Yeah.
And so the husband who's called to lead, and leadership is kind and gracious and gentle and self-sacrificial.
Yep. Servant. Yeah.
It's a servant leader, right? That's what we're called to be. The woman, part of what the curse is that she's going to want to take authority. She's going to want to step up and take control, and at worst, like just run over her husband. And sometimes the husband's passive, like Adam was, or he snaps back and
It's domineering.
is domineering. Right.
Okay. So is that the root of all marriage relational struggle now in our fallen world?
Most of it, yeah. I mean, like it's
Could be traced
the product
back to
of the curse. Yeah, exactly. Right. And so then Adam is
What's Adam's curse?
that he has to work hard for food and to feed his family.
Thorns and thistles.
Yeah, exactly. And so it used to be easy. Now it's hard. Not easy, but there was work, but it wasn't as toilsome as it is now.
Like the sweat of his brow.
Yeah, he's got to work hard and fight thorns and thistles and stuff. The ground used to just naturally make food, and now he has to fight for it, right?
And
so
there's relational struggle.
there's relational struggle, but God doesn't reference that.
Okay.
He only referenced that to Eve, and so then that introduces then a downward cycle that is profound, right? And so from there we see mankind go down and down and down and down, and in fact, Lamech, who just a few chapters later, is
Noah's dad or Noah's grandpa?
No, it is. Let's see, he's down the line from Adam, so he maybe. Well, basically, I'm not sure. It's a good question.
I'm gonna pull it up.
Hey, you find out while I'm reading this. Lamech, basically, so we have Cain and Abel. Cain kills Abel. Then we have Lamech saying to his wives, he makes up this little rap in Genesis chapter 4 where he kills somebody for basically hitting him. And so he brags, if Cain's revenge is sevenfold, then Lamech's is 77-fold. And so then we have the story about how Adam and Eve brought forth Seth, and Seth is the line in which Jesus would come from. But things get worse and worse and worse, and God decides to send a flood upon creation and wipe out all living things and save humanity through an ark with Noah and his family and the animals. And even once the waters abate and Noah and his family are on dry ground, still mankind's intentions are evil, and so it gets so bad that everybody having the same language comes together and tries to build a tower reaching to the heavens called the Tower of Babel in Genesis chapter 11. And in Genesis 11, we have God coming down and confusing the languages of the people so they can't communicate, and they spread to the four corners of the earth. Now, but even though it's as bad as it could get, God in mercy calls Abram, who was just an idol worshiper from Ur, calls Abram to follow him. And Abraham believed in God's promises, and it was counted as righteousness. And Abraham is the first of the new creation, as it were. So he's the beginning of the Jewish nation, and then through his family, we begin to track the progress of redemption.
You're going real fast.
Yeah.
Sorry. I was just going to pull you back a couple things first before we move through redemption. Yes, Lamech was Noah's dad.
Okay, so Lamech was a bad dude.
Right. So Noah and his family, Noah had Shem, and the line was continued down to Abraham, and then also to King David, and eventually to Jesus.
Abraham is the beginning of the line to Jesus, right, through David. And so Abraham, but he's got his own troubles. You can read those on your own in Genesis chapter 12 all the way through 25. But
Why were they building the Tower of Babel? Why
they
were
were trying to take heaven by storm. And-
self-glorification?
Yeah, right, exactly. And God's like, no, we're not doing
No.
it that way. So
Okay.
God, now you would think that God would destroy everything.
But he promised not to after the flood.
but
He
with
promised not to
water.
do water again.
Next time it'll be fire. This time was water.
Yeah.
And so he's not going to do that again.
Yeah.
And so God in mercy calls Abram, and Abram is the father of Israel.
And where was Abram at? He was outside of
Ur. He was in he was Ur
was
of
like
the
40.
Chaldeans. Huh?
He was 40. His family was rich.
No, he was 80. And
He was for 40 years.
yeah,
Sorry.
right, exactly. He was 80, and he was, yeah. There's a whole thing there, but God used Abram was childless. Sarai, who was with him, his wife, she didn't have any children. There was a promise that the line of the Messiah would come through Abraham.
Yeah.
It's a miracle that they had children. God did that, right? And it leads all the way up to the nation of Israel. And so you have the progress of redemption from Abram all the way to Israel. And through Israel, you have both the tabernacle and the temple.
Yeah.
And those were the places that God dwelt, as it were. And that was the place, like there was a whole sacrificial system set up by God where the sins of the people and the sins of the priests were atoned for by sacrifice of animals. And so that Jewish sacrificial system went on for centuries, right? So ingrained in the Jewish mind was the idea that sin is so bad, something has to die. Somebody has to shed their blood, right?
Right.
And so that's the story of the Old Testament. That's Leviticus. And so you can read about the Day of Atonement is another place there, right? Mm-hmm. So the Day of Atonement was the day that once a year that the high priest would go into the Holy of Holies, and they would make two sacrifices, right? And you can read about the Day of Atonement in Leviticus, and it is there. That's where we get the phrase scapegoat. Have you ever heard that phrase, Mark?
Yeah.
So that,
Like I'm going to blame Heather if this episode doesn't turn out well.
as we should not blame Heather because
I'm kidding.
yeah, right, exactly. Heather makes us sound better and be better than we really
Absolutely.
are. Right? But Yom Kippur is the Day of Atonement. That's
I saw that on my
phrase.
Google calendar.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But it's described in Leviticus 16, right?
Yeah.
And so the high priest would sacrifice a bull for his own sins and a goat for the people's sins. Then he would also take another goat outside the camp, and he would pronounce the sins of the people on the goat's head, and send that goat out into the desert. And symbolically what that does is it carries both, someone dies for the sins of the people, and the sins are taken far away from the people, right?
Yeah.
And so you get this picture of God's of both the need for sacrifice and the hope for forgiveness.
Right.
And so the problem becomes then the nation of Israel is unfaithful. They don't respond.
Over and over. That's the cycle.
They're just like us, right? Over and over and over. That's the cycle, right? And so now Moses says in Deuteronomy, you should look for someone like me who's going to come.
Yeah.
Listen to him.
Deuteronomy 18:15.
That's right. Do you have it?
The Lord your God will raise up for you a prophet like me from among you, from your brothers. It is to him you shall listen.
Yeah, and so that's Jesus.
Yeah.
Jesus comes. He's Jewish, obviously. He comes from the line of David, the line of Abraham, and he is the Messiah. He's the promised Messiah he's the serpent crusher in Genesis 3. He's the promised Messiah from Deuteronomy 16 with Moses. He's also the servant from Isaiah 53, right? And so all these images of the coming Messiah are found in Jesus, right?
All makes sense.
Everything, and it all fits together, right?
Yeah.
And so he then is the one who crushes the serpent by dying. And you look back and go, oh, he crushes the serpent by being crushed himself.
Bruising his heel.
But he rose from the dead.
Yeah.
And so it was like bruising, like in the scheme of things, like bruising his heel is not as serious as crushing the head of the Satan, right? Exactly. But he really died.
Yeah.
And that's how he defeated Satan. And, now he's king. He's at the right hand of the Father in heaven, right? And so that is the ultimate redemption now. And that's why we don't have temples and tabernacles, and we don't bring animals to church to sacrifice, because we have the once and for all sacrifice of Jesus Christ that satisfies for all sins.
Right.
And so then we have
And
the Gospels.
then it keeps going.
Yeah, it does. We have the Gospels that show us the life of Jesus. And if you'll read the Gospels, most of the Gospels, most of the ink is spilled on of the last week of his life, showing us that that's the most important time, right? Half of the book of John focuses on the last week of Jesus' life.
Yeah.
And so the most important time, the most important thing Jesus did was die and rise again. Then we have Acts, which tells the history of the early church, and then all of the epistles after that, which speak of the significance and importance of Jesus' death and resurrection and what it means for us as believers.
So Christianity explodes.
It explodes all over
Christ
the world.
explodes.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. Before that, it wasn't even called Christianity.
Yeah, right. It was
Through Paul's epistles and other
shifted,
writings.
right, exactly.
It spreads like wildfire.
Right. So that redemption is found as fulfillment in Jesus, and now we have the message of redemption that we're called to preach the world over, right? And that has reached us. We're not Middle Eastern Jewish people. We're Americans. So the gospel has spread in these 20 centuries to us here in the United States. And so that's amazing. And then ultimately, then, the last two chapters of Revelation is the restoration, which is the complete and total reversal of the curse. It's gone forever, and it's replaced by the new heavens and the new earth. So creation is remade. We, as part of creation, are remade, and we have new bodies, and we live on the new heavens and the new earth, and we live in a place that's better than Eden. In Eden, snakes could come in and speak to us and lead us astray. In the new heavens and new earth, that can't happen.
Okay.
And we'll be with God, and we'll see Jesus and be like him, and live for all eternity with him in his place for his glory. Learning every day, learning more and more and more and more about him without ever learning everything there is to know about him.
Okay, that sounds beautiful. Is there anything else about the new heavens and the new earth that we can discern from Scripture about what it'll be like, or is a lot of it mystery? Besides what you already
It's
said?
mysterious. If you read the last two chapters of Revelation, it speaks a lot about what's not there.
Yeah.
Like there'd be no crying, no tears, no pain anymore, because the former things have passed away, right?
Yeah.
And we can't understand how good it will be, so it's easier to say what's not there.
Yeah.
What's not going to happen, because our world is so dominated by crying and tears and pain that we can't adequately understand. So like, if he says, here's what it's going to be like, we don't have the categories. It'd blow our minds.
Yeah.
It'll be just
don't
like,
have language.
no, we don't have language to understand it, right? And so it'll just be like, it'll be so good and so amazing. And it will be that place we knew we were born for, but had never visited until then. It'll be that place that we will find ultimate and total fulfillment and ultimate and total happiness and ultimate and total peace, unlike anything we've ever experienced.
Love it. I got a couple follow-ups. Thank you for sharing that. You just walked us through the entire Bible in 20 minutes. A book that we would want to recommend is by Vaughn Roberts. It's called God's Big Picture.
That's right. That's a great book. That's a great introduction to this. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, and it'll walk you through a very similar, maybe even more expanded version of what we just did.
Right. Yeah.
And then the interesting part about this is you and I and Heather and everyone listening has a fully completed Bible where we can see the entire picture at once. How should we, taking this biblical theological storyline, how should we then read our Bible based on knowing this entire story? Why does this matter? Why does we just talk about this?
Yeah. I mean, because if you look in the Old Testament, you realize as you read the prophets, they're calling Israel back to faithfulness, and you recognize, the Messiah hasn't come yet. They don't have the Spirit of God within them, so it's going to be different than us, right?
Yeah.
But we need to respond and confess and repent from our sins as well. And it's easier because we have the Spirit of God within us, right? And so you need to always ask, and always, if you'll notice, all of the Bible points to, both Old and New Testament, Jesus, his person and work, right?
Yeah.
And so you want to ask, okay, is this predictive of or descriptive of Jesus and his work? in some way, every part of the Old Testament is predictive of and or descriptive of Jesus and what he's done for us.
It's so amazing.
And then in the New Testament, it's usually descriptive of what he's done for us, right? And the Gospels
Naming
are focusing
him
on
specifically. The Old Testament might not name him as Jesus.
They don't.
They're pointing
it doesn't.
to it.
It's a Messiah, though, right? Yeah, exactly. And but you can see his person and work is anticipated on every page of the Old Testament.
Yeah.
And when you recognize that he's the point of the Old Testament, then you recognize, okay, now I know how to read the Old Testament. Now I know what I'm doing here.
Yeah.
Right? If that makes sense.
Love it. Okay. And then last one, knowing that eternity is our destination as sojourners here on earth.
Yeah.
And we're just here for a short glimpse of time here on earth.
Yeah, right.
How should that affect our walk with the Lord? Like, how do we view everything that's happening in light of eternity or through the lens of heaven or eternity?
That's
a loaded
hard.
question.
It's hard, right? I mean,
we're so caught up in like even right now, I'm like, I'm a little thirsty. I got to use the restroom.
Yeah, right.
Heather's giving me that mean look again.
Right.
How do I but that's not an eternity perspective. That's a very right now, right here's perspective.
Yeah, I think we have to fight for it. I mean, we have to fight to remember that we will live one day forever somewhere. And it puts everything in perspective, right? Our suffering, as real as it is, Paul says it's not worth comparing to the glory that will be revealed to us. When we go through hardships and trials and we think this is the worst ever and I can't imagine it's not worth it. It is worth it, right? When we see Jesus, when it's hard to follow Jesus and when it doesn't seem like things make sense, we can know for sure and for certain that's just for a short time.
Yeah,
One
this
day,
is not our home.
Everything will make sense, right?
Yeah.
And so like, the way that the second coming and the end of all things functions in the New Testament is very much like, as you see the day approaching, press in all the more, right? Because I think the danger is that we get lazy and we sluggish and sleepy and we act like this world is all there is, and that we have just infinite number of days that stretch out before us, and that we have plenty of time to make decisions. We have plenty of time to change our direction. We have plenty of time to get to know God. We have plenty of time to do all that other stuff. That's a lie. We don't.
Yeah.
We don't know when our lives are going to be over. We don't know when our time is up. We don't know where we will meet our Maker, but we will one day meet him. And so the question is, in the short time we have, how do we want to live?
Yeah.
Live to honor him, right?
Yeah.
And so that's kind of a short answer to how we do that. And I think we as Americans are uniquely bad at this because for one of the first times in history, we live in a place that's pretty appealing. And, we try to remake heaven on earth in ways that is just it's not realistic. It's not like it distracts us.
Yeah.
And so I think we just have to keep in mind that eternity's coming.
Yeah. Well, thank you for laying all that out and explaining it. If this is something you're interested in or you have additional questions, feel free to reach out to us at production@centergilbert.com. We just appreciate you listening and check out the show notes for references.
All right. We'll see you next time.
I'm trying to think of a joke to make fun of Rich.
Go ahead.
You can make fun of me if you want.
Seriously.
No, I get letters if I
Cease and desist.
Yeah. Billy Carson's going to jump in.
Oh my gosh. All right, let's be ready. Are you ready?
Yes.
Okay.
Ready.
Oh, gosh. Are you recording this?
Oh, of course I am. I don't know that I'll use it, but it'll be on my personal files.
Heather.